Hello everyone, this is Debarghya Ganguli, and today we shall go on into the lecture on Nissim Ezekiel's enterprise. Now, previously we had covered up the Vedic and Vedantic eras where Nissim Ezekiel was talking about the issues of the exalted minds and the lightened burdens. But today we shall talk about the second stage explored but did not test the call. The sun beat down to match our rage. Now, in this regard, I would love to mention that the second stage is perhaps a reference to the British colonial era, where the British did not take into consideration our own ways of belief, our own systems of functioning. For instance, if you look at something as simple as Lord Macaulay's minutes, you'll realize that what Macaulay and people like Macaulay did was that they thoroughly eradicated our own systems of belief, our own systems of existence, and supplanted it with their own systems of existence and their own systems of belief. For instance, let me just give you one example. Say in a text, let's take the example of the schooling system. Initially, we had the pathshalas and we had the universities like Nalanda. But what happened was that Macaulay brought the new schooling system, or the British brought the new schooling system, the new collegiate system, and everything. So, in this regard, what happened was that we initially studied Arabic, Farsi, arithmetic, geometry, and Sanskrit, and such things. But now English became a major component because they needed a series of educated Bengali clerks. Alright, so they shifted the entire system. And when this entire system got shifted, it took away from us our existing systems and supplanted it with their existing systems. So, what happened was that the second stage explored, they thoroughly understood that what we were doing but did not test the call. The sun beat down to match our rage. Now, you might think, why am I talking about the British governance? Because you see, the most commonplace idiom associated with the British governance is that the sun never sets on British soil. And look, Ezekiel mentions the sun beat down to match our rage. So it talks about the pent up aggressions that the Indians had, and it also hints at the coming forth of the Indian National Congress. So we stood it very well, I thought, observed and put down copious notes on things the best peasants sold and bought. So look, what happened was that the British were actually a race of businessmen, and they had come here only for the purpose of business. But later, when they understood that it is easier to subdue a people and thrust upon them your business intentions rather than trying to plead them and get them into doing business with you, they chose the former. That is, they supplanted our monarchy with the British monarchy. In this context, if you have seen Satyajit Ray's Shatranj Ke Khilari, then you will understand it very well, that how they did it. It's a very interesting movie if you have watched it. If not, then there's a lot of time. Please watch it. A good movie will only help you in understanding your own contexts. Now, so what happened was that the original intention of the Indian National Congress, the early phase at least, was to plead and appeal. That is, they wanted to present the problems that we are facing to the British governance and ask from them certain amendments in their ways, in their rule, and certain allowances. So, look, we observed and put down copious notes on things the peasants sold and bought. So, you see the British governance. For instance, let's take an example of the Muslim governance before that. Starting from the Das dynasty of Kutubuddin Aibak and his descendants, to, say, Bahadur Shah, none of the Muslim rulers who actually ruled in India, none of them actually thought that they were not Indians. Akbar believed that he was Indian. Jahangir believed that he was Indian. None of them believed that they were outside India, but the British, the rulers at least, never believed that they were a part of India. They knew that they were outsiders, Indians were lesser than them, and they were here to rule and govern. Alright, so this is a marked difference, and they were here to simply sell and buy. In this regard, I would ask you to listen to the famous lecture by Shashi Tharoor, where he was talking about does India owe reparations from Britain. It's a very famous topic on which he spoke quite eloquently, and the video is available on YouTube. You can easily find it. It's a lecture of 15 minutes hardly, so I think you can hear it and try to understand what was happening. That is how much the economic paradigm was functioning in the British governance, in the British rule. So, under the garb of their despotic enlightenment, they were actually plundering us, they were actually destroying our culture, and they were not even ashamed of it. So, in any case, so the things the peasants sold and bought. Now, why peasants? Now, Indian culture is a rural culture, an agrarian culture. So, in that case, where a country's 70% population are peasants, so the raw material that they would be selling and buying, so that will be definitely the marker of India's economic growth or India's economic GDP, if I am to use that word. So, things the peasants sold and bought. The way of serpents and goats. Why the way of serpents and goats? You see, when he talks about serpent and goat, as we have already understood from our first lecture, that he talks about a pilgrimage, and I spoke about Geoffrey Chaucer. Now, when you think about serpent, you think about the early Christian culture, the serpent who beguiled Eve. And when you think about the goat, you think about the Dionysian culture of Greek, where the entire concept of tragedy came from goat. Tragos plus Idia, goat song. Now, I'm not going that far, but imagine the goat is often kept as a bait. It's the hunted, and the snake is often the hunter. So, the ways of serpents and goats talks about the relationship that the British had with India, the serpent and the goats. And look, 3 cities where a sage had taught. This sage is perhaps none other than Mahatma Gandhi. Now, talking about Gandhi, I would urge you to read one simple thing, that is the preface to the novel Kanthapura. Alright, that's mandatory. If you read the preface to Kanthapura, there you will understand that how Gandhi was seen. Simply just the preface would do. Alright, Kanthapura, that's a very famous novel. So 3 cities are actually the 3 metropolitan cities: Calcutta, Madras, Bombay. So 3 cities where a sage had taught. But when the differences arose on how to cross a desert patch, we lost a friend whose stylish prose was quite the best of all our batch. Now, this difference talks about the breakaway in the Indian National Congress, with Muhammad Ali Jinnah asking for a separate country, which would be primarily Islamic in nature. So, but when the differences arose, the differences talk about the independence, which also tore apart our country into 2 different land masses. So, but when the differences arose on how to cross a desert patch, the desert patch was the troubled times, and the desert patch also refers to the journey of the Israelites who had to cross a desert patch to arrive at their destined land. So you see how Ezekiel makes an intricate design of the Bible, of history, of myth, of politics, of economy and artistry. That's why he stands alone, He stands apart from the most of the other poets. We lost a friend whose stylish prose was quite the best of all our batch. Talks about Muhammad Ali Jinnah, who was quite an erudite person himself. A shadow falls on us and grows. The shadow of the partition still looms large over all of us. And this is a reality that we cannot completely forget. The trauma of that reality is still existing amongst us. And I do not know how long it will be there, but that was really an unfortunate event which India had to go through and Pakistan had to go through. So I end this lecture over here. In the next lecture, let's hope to complete this. Thank you.